This is Eileen Griffin with the Heartland View from the Heartland Daily News, bringing you information and analysis about public policy stories that affect your life, your health, your freedoms, and the nation's economy. This week, first, I want to point out that this is the first week of summer, so happy summer, everybody. Summer is a great time, and after a year of COVID lockdowns, summer feels pretty darn good. So it's good to get out, good to feel free, and enjoy summer. So I hope you're all doing that. Now, let's cover some news stories out of Heartland Daily News. We've got some interesting updates. California, as always, in the news with not particularly good news. And I'm always hopeful for California. It's just such a beautiful state, an amazing state, such a wonderful history. So always hopeful, but we're still looking at some bad news today. So outmigration in California continues. A report came out on 2019 data, which is not encouraging. But in 2019, the IRS documented in Wirepoint's reports that California residents decreased $8.8 billion in 2019, the wealth of Californians by leaving the state. So the number of Californians leaving, 165,355 people in 2019, translating to a loss of wealth of $8.8 billion. So that's a lot of money, it's a lot of loss, a lot of people. So California is the second worst among all the lower 48 states. There's only one state that ranks worse than that. Anybody want to guess what that is? Well, that's New York. So you've got 5 states that continue to be a problem in this area without migration, as well as other areas, but you've got New York, New Jersey, California, Illinois, Maryland. Now, these are the same states that, one, they continue to have these high tax rates, but they also have this skyrocketing crime. So the same states, same problem. Crime is off the charts in many of the major cities in these states. So why wouldn't people leave? If you have terrible crime, you can't feel safe, and you're paying a fortune to live there in terms of taxes, why not leave? So that's exactly what they're doing. So these states suffering from outmigration, they're crying poor, they're losing revenue, but they're shooting themselves in the foot. So we're going to see this for these states. They're going to see a challenge in tax revenues going forward into the coming years, unless they turn it around. And I think we should all hope for that for them. So let's talk about, there's some news out of West Virginia. This is a good, happy story. So West Virginia is forming a task force, and what they're trying to do is improve the integration between training and certificate programs designed to help these residents get jobs. Now that's good news for job seekers. Lots of ways to gain skills, and there are many high-paying jobs in need of skilled workers. We know there's a skills shortage right now. There aren't enough people coming out of school and joining the labor market with the skills needed by employers. So what kinds of skills? Well, for example, there's a shortage in a lot of the trades. So if you were interested in a trade, welding, electrician, heavy equipment, those are good paying jobs. Those are good trades and good skills. And with a lot of those, what's great too is you're not necessarily having to pay to go get the training or education to learn the job. A lot of it's on the job training. So a lot of trades, they'll train you right there. They pay you while you learn, and then you walk into a job and you've already got the training, the skills, the education. Now, West Virginia is going to be looking at some of these gaps and some of these things. We don't know yet. It's too new. We don't know exactly what they're going to be looking at, what types of jobs or skills. But in general terms, there's an awful lot of opportunities out there. There is a shortage of workers right now, and there's been a skills gap ongoing for quite some time. So West Virginia, on the right track. Let's hope other states take a look at this program and find ways to help their residents also look at opportunities for jobs and job training. Okay, news from Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's in the news again with an interesting plan. They're trying to use their COVID relief funds to plug their pension gap. So Pennsylvania receives $7.29 billion from the American Rescue Plan, and the local governments receive an additional $6.2 billion. So more than 60 Pennsylvania municipalities have pension plans that are moderately or severely underfunded. So this looked like a great windfall for them. They could possibly plug in these holes, get these pension plans back on track using these funds. But nope, they cannot do that. They have been told that is not an option. So Auditor General Timothy DeFoor has warned local officials eyeing this relief money as an opportunity to plug these holes. And they've said the solution to the pension problem cannot be using funds from the American Rescue Plan. It's not an option. So lots of money coming from the federal government, lots of money going to the state of Pennsylvania, but none of it will be fixing the pension shortfall. Okay. Next story, there's a news story from Dennis Prager. This is on heartlanddailynews.com, and I'm going to give you an overview, but it's a really interesting, thought-provoking article that I would encourage you to read. I think people will have different perspectives on this. It's interesting. So the title of the article is "The Moral and Religious Case Against Unconditional Love." So Dennis Prager says, think about unconditional love in terms of unconditional salaries. So an unconditional paycheck. So if you look at it that way, does an unconditional paycheck make sense? Would you pay a person the same regardless of how they performed in their job? Would the salary be the same regardless of whether they came on time, whether they showed up at all, whether they performed to satisfaction, whether they succeeded, whatever they achieved? And the answer, it's a rhetorical question, he says, but really the answer, of course, is no. You would want to be paid more for doing a better job. That's part of our great capitalist system. So people are encouraged and motivated when they have an opportunity to earn more. And by doing more and doing better, they have this opportunity, and so they're really motivated, and that's what gets people to achieve and drives them in certain respects. He says, well, let's apply that concept to unconditional love. So is love unconditional, or is it like a salary conditional? He says, if a kind, self-sacrificing, responsible person were to receive no more love than a narcissist, a murderer, or a thief, the world would be a far more unjust place than it already is. Well, Dennis Prager says, I've studied for many years, and he's looked at the Bible, and he said, there is admonition in the Bible. There's a very clear directive of people being treated differently based on how they behave. So it doesn't say everybody's treated the same. It doesn't say everybody will be loved the same. There's very clear directives, there's commandments, there's directions, there's rules that we have to live by if we are going to be a biblically based person or a person of faith. So if you're following the Bible, you really are looking at conditional love, not unconditional love. And the Bible will say there's things you must do, things that you have to do, things that you're commanded to do in order to be loved, which would be conditional love. So in his research, he said the first place he found the concept, the notion of unconditional love as a thing is in the 1970s, which is ironic because the 1970s is when we started to see this move into a more secular society. You know, that's when we start to see a lot more of this idea of moral relativism and you're getting away from standards and rules and structure of a religion. And so this is interesting that in the 70s, all of a sudden you start to see the concept unconditional love. And it pops up everywhere. So as the country's becoming more secular, it's becoming more interested in unconditional love. When the country is more religious, it relies on conditional love. Very interesting concept, something to think about. But the way Dennis Prager concludes it is to say that the idea of unconditional love is secular and it's bad. That's what he says. That's the end of the news for this week. We're keeping it short because we had some really good comments that I want to address. So first of all, one of the comments, we had talked I think it was last week or the week before, we had covered a lot about California. It's always California. But we had covered California. We talked about the rolling blackouts and the problems with water and all of those things. And a question came up about, what about drought? And the person, it was on a YouTube comment, said, does Heartland Institute have any information about drought, and have they researched droughts? And the answer is yes. So if you look at heartland.org, so beyond the Heartland Daily News, but into the actual Institute website, heartland.org, you can find under publications a number of different things, research that's been done on droughts. Now I'm going to put some links on the bottom of the video for you, but again, that should be fairly easy to find, and there's a lot of good material. I think you'll find it valuable. Thank you for the question, and I hope that gives you the answer you're looking for. The second comment, so there was another comment on the message board from Dora, and she brought up when we talked about all this spending, we've been talking about the Biden proposal for all this additional spending, the infrastructure spending, the COVID relief spending, and all the other plans that are extremely expensive, and then also result in increased taxes. So she points out, two concerns with the increased taxes, ongoing taxes, and ongoing expenses. She points out corruption, which is a good point. And then she also points out, what about taxation without representation? Is that what we're seeing now? Or, why can't we get more local representation? And so what I would say to that is, that's absolutely right. And that was the intent of the Founding Fathers. The intent of the Founding Fathers was to have representation of the people when we're talking about and when we're voting on and when we're deciding on things such as taxes. But what's happened over time, as we all know, is that we have more career politicians. And what that means is instead of a representative, a person that goes, that leaves their home, their community, their job, and goes and sacrifices and represents us for a certain period of time in DC, we have a lot of people now that are sitting in Washington, DC. They're supposed to be representing us, but they haven't been back to represent us in a long time. And maybe they come back to visit, but they're really people of DC at this point. They've been there for many, many years. They live there. Their children go to school there. So the sense of the idea of representative government is diminished by this change in how we're represented. So excellent point, Dora. Absolutely. And the only, in terms of a solution, the only thing is, as voters, what we can do is try to vote for people that do seem to represent us. And then when they go to Washington, D.C., they're more likely to be representative of the group of people that they are hired and elected to represent. So I hope that responds to your comments, Dora. I hope that's helpful. And if anybody else has comments or questions, please feel free to leave them on the message boards. We appreciate them. They're interesting and fun. These were two great ones this week. So again, as always, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. For more information, go to heartlanddailynews.com on these stories and many others. Have a great week, everybody. Next week, we're going to talk about 4th of July, and we're going to celebrate our independence. Until then, have a great week.